Hello there, Michelle Short here for My Favourite Things. Today I'm creating a mini scene card using shape dies for the background. So let's get started. This is the adorable You Bring Sunshine set. I love the cute little bunnies and the bears in this set. I'm keeping my card pretty clean and simple today, so I thought I would just stamp one of the bears and one of the chicks. I was very tempted to stamp loads of the little chicks. I think they're absolutely adorable. But like I say, I'm keeping the scene pretty clean and simple today. So taking that bear with the hoodie on, and then also this cute little chick here. And I'm also going to take the sentiment from the Something for Everything set. And I'm just using the hello sentiment. I really love the font on this set, and I thought I would just create kind of like a generic card. I really love creating generic hello cards to send to friends throughout the year. So I'm just going to stamp those images down. I'm using the Mini Misty today. Stamping them down onto some smooth white cardstock using black ink. So inking up these images here really well with that black ink. And then I can stamp those down onto the cardstock. I am going to stamp these twice just to make sure that I get a really nice dark impression for those outlines. So I can just stamp those down again. And then I've got my images ready to go to add some colour. I'm using Copic markers today. So I'm starting off by colouring in this adorable chick. I'm starting off with a base layer of the Y17, and then I'm bringing in the YR27. As you can see, this is quite a lot darker than the base layer, so I did just want to add that base layer in first, and I find that it helps sometimes when the colours are completely different to blend them together a lot easier. I can then bring in the Y15. And then finish off with that Y13. And then for his beak, I'm using YR16. For the bear, I'm starting off with her fur. So I'm bringing in my darkest shade here just to map out where I think the darkest areas would be. So this is E59, kind of like a warm brown shade. So just going around, mainly sort of focusing most of the colour towards the left hand side. So just along her ear there, and then the other one. I can then bring in E57 to blend that out. So just pushing that colour further into the image, and then also going over where I coloured with the darker colour to blend those two shades together. I can then go in with my lightest shade here, which is E55, and for the smaller areas they do blend really nicely together, but as you can see, this larger area on her face, I'm not getting very much of a blend. So what I decided to do was just to go in first of all and add that base layer. I can then go back in with the mid-tone shade and just bring in a little more of that to try and blend those two shades together. Sometimes it doesn't always work first time with a blending with alcohol markers, so it's quite nice to kind of jump between the two. I can then bring in the E49 to colour in her nose. For the inside of her ears, I'm using RV55 and RV52, just to add a little bit of pink there. And then for her hoodie, I'm starting off with my darkest shade of purple markers, which is V17. Again, trying to focus most of the darker colour towards the left-hand side. But I am adding a little bit on the right-hand side as well, just to where I think maybe there would be some shadows. I can then bring in the V15 and try and blend those two shades together. And then I'm jumping to the V01, and again this is quite a lot lighter, so I'm just going to go over the area to start with this colour, add a few layers of that to get that cardstock nice and saturated with the colour, and then I can bring back the V15 and then try and blend those two shades together. I don't add any more of the V17 because I do think it's quite dark as it is, but just bringing in those two, or the mid-tone shade and the lighter shade, I think that works really nicely together. But sometimes it does take a few layers just to get that blended how I want it. For her trousers, I wanted them to look like jeans, so I started off with B99, then I brought in B97, B95, and then I can finish off with B93. And I think these shades work really nicely for denim. I can then bring in the coordinating dynamics, place those over the images and hold them down with some low tack tape. So I can do that for the bear and the chick, and then also the hello sentiment. And then I've got some space on this panel of cardstock, so I can cut out my background pieces. This is the Stitch Rounded Hexagon Stacks Dynamics. I really love the shape of these, that they've got those kind of rounded edges. So I can hold those down with some low tack tape and then run that panel through my die cutting machine. I can then pop everything out on the other side. So I've got all of my images here nicely cut out, and then those 3 hexagons as well. I want to add some colour onto these hexagons for the background. So I'm just adding some temporary adhesive onto the back of those so that I can adhere them down onto a scrap piece of paper. You could definitely use a sticky mat or something like that. I go between the two sometimes. Sometimes I like using a sticky mat. Sometimes I just like using some scrap paper. I'm then just turning that paper to the side because I find it a little bit easier to kind of go in from the right hand side with my blending brushes. So I'm using some distress ink here to add some ink blending onto these shapes. So I'm starting off with Twisted Citron at the bottom to add in a little bit of grass. I do want to try and have these line up, but I am going to have this middle size hexagon a little bit lower on the card. So I do want to bring that grass up a little bit further than I did on the larger shape. I can then bring in Mowed Lawn Distress ink and add a little bit of that towards the bottom just to darken that up slightly. And then for the sky, I'm using Wilted Violet. I thought that the purple shade would work really nicely with the hoodie for the bear. It's a little bit unconventional having a purple sky, but I do quite like the vibrancy of it. I often do skies in like pinks and things like that as well. I just happen to like the look, but I do think blue would work really nicely here as well. So just adding that towards the top of these hexagons here. And then for the small one, I'm completely filling this in with the purple because that's going to be a lot higher than the other two. So that would be completely sky. So just making sure that it's a little bit darker at the top and then fading down to lighter at the bottom. I am leaving a gap between the grass and the sky because purple and green tend to make brown, so I didn't really want that. I'm then taking some little grass blade stamps that are in that stamp set, and I'm just going to stamp them down onto the middle size of the hexagon because this is going to be the one where the chick is going to be. There's not much else going on that hexagon, and the chick is absolutely tiny even for this small hexagon, so I wanted there just to be some added extra interest. So I'm stamping these grass blades with the Mowed Lawn Distress ink. I'm not going to get a perfect impression, but that's okay. I just wanted there to be a little bit more interest on that. So next I've got my card base here. This is an A2 size white card base, which is a finished size of 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. And then I've still got that removable adhesive on the back of these hexagons. So I'm just placing them down onto my panel here, so that I can just try and have everything lined up where I think it's going to end up before I actually stick those down. I don't want to accidentally stick these down with foam tape and then have a really hard time trying to move them. So I can add some thin foam tape onto the back of the hexagons. Then I can remove the backings off of that foam tape, and then I can place the first one down here on the left hand side, and I've got those other two there for placement purposes. I am just bringing in a T-square ruler there just to make sure that that is straight. And then I can pop the other one down here on the right hand side, and then the one there at the top, and I'm just trying to center them as best as possible. I can then add some more thin foam tape onto the back of the images. I can remove the backings off of that foam tape, and then I can place them down onto the card. So I've got the bear here in the larger hexagon, and then that adorable little chick here in that middle size one. And then for the sentiment, I didn't want to struggle adding some foam tape onto the back of that. It was bad enough adding the foam tape onto the back of that adorable little chick. So instead of adding the foam tape, I thought that I would stack up some of the dies. So I've cut the die another 2 times from white cardstock, and then I can stack those up with some liquid glue. And that's just going to give me the dimension that I want without adding foam tape. So just popping the last one here on the top. And then because I'm using that liquid glue, I can wiggle them around, make sure that they're lined up. And then I can pop some more glue on the back of the sentiment here, and then I can pop that down onto the top hexagon. And then I can just press that down. And then I wanted to add a little bit of extra embellishment onto this card. Like I say, because that hexagon is quite empty, I thought it'd be quite nice to add some clear droplets. So I'm adding 2 towards the top of that hexagon there, and then I can just add a 3rd here towards the back of that bear. And then last but not least, I thought I would add some white highlights with a 0.7 white jelly roll pen. Although I'm calling these highlights, I'm actually putting them in the places where it's the darkest. Ordinarily, I would go for highlights in the lighter areas, but I just wanted to add some kind of added interest onto these images, and I quite liked how they were, and they just happened to be in the places where it was darker. And so that's the card finished for today. I really love how the scene kind of flows between those 3 hexagons. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.